Hello everyone, Randy Harrington here. Tonight I'm going to bring you a interview I did about 9 years ago with a friend of mine named Quartz Griner. He's a photographer down in Texas, and I joined him on an expedition at Paris Lake in Texas. And this is an interview that he did with me about my thermal camera.
And, over the years, most researchers purchase the best equipment that they can afford, to enhance their chances of seeing one of these creatures. And so I went through that whole gamut of spending all kinds of money on game cams, night vision, and all those type of things. But finally, I got to the point where, I got a thermal. Now, there's different types of thermals you can get. Most of them are handheld units that have the monitor built in. I don't recommend those, and even though I've never had one, I have seen people use them. And the reason is, anybody who's done any kind of research knows that there's certain things that is a dead stop for a Bigfoot encounter, and that is, if you look at them, if you shine a light at them, all of these things make them feel threatened, and a lot of times they will vacate the area. This thermal allows me to separate the monitor from the camera with a 20-foot tether, so I can mount these cameras up in a tree and let it run all night long. And they don't give off any light. Right now I've got it on top of a 12-foot pole that I can spin around within my tent. As you can see the monitor here, as there's the woods outside. And I can see 360 degrees around my camera and watch the woods. And you can see well into the woods. I mean, you could probably see 100 yards into the woods. So it gives you an incredible advantage that these creatures don't know that we have. Technology is certainly catching up to them. And so that's what I like about this thermal. The camera separates from the monitor. And I've also put this together as a mobile unit. I can hook it on my belt. It runs off a small ATV battery, and it's all one unit with a DVR and a flash card. And I use the camera on top of a walking stick, about 6 foot, 7 foot tall walking stick. And that allows me to hike and to walk in areas with this technology. And the benefit to this is, a lot of times everyone who does research knows how sneaky these creatures are, and because of their stealth, they like to come in behind you. They like to keep themselves at an advantage, and in order for you to view them at what they're doing, this camera allows you to see behind you without turning your body around to end the encounter. You can pretend like you don't see them, and you can let the camera do the work, and that is why I love this camera. And he's got clothes on, so you can kind of see the separation of heat from his head to where his upper body is covered with a coat. If he was a naked animal with only hair, his whole body would be white.
Hey Randy, when was the first the first really good heat signature you ever got when you got the flare? Like, what was the what was that like? What, like, wow, this really paid off, for the first time,
I was at, well, the best one for me that really just made me think, wow, this is a really valuable piece of equipment, was when it was 4 years to the day that I was back at the Chickasaw Park, and I had 4 or 5 other people with me, and I was actually in the same campsite, and that's why I stay almost every time, the same campsite that I've had my encounter. I don't know if it's just luck or if it's just superstition, but I try to, spend time in the exact same campsite. Well, anyways, this was my first time with my thermal camera there, and I don't know how long I'd had the thermal at that time, but I told the fellas, I said, what I'm going to do, there was only one other campsite that was occupied that night. It was February 2nd, February 3rd, whatever day of my encounter was. It was a cold month, and when we got there, there was only one other campsite being taken, and there was no camp host, in February. And they were on the creek, but further up, about 4 or 5 campsites up on the creek, Rock Creek right there. And so from campsite 30, you actually have to walk across a small road and then another campsite to get to the creek, which is Rock Creek. And that's the creek that I heard the big one cross the night of my encounter. Well, anyway, so I have this thermal now, and I'm really excited about it. And of course, we were playing with it all afternoon and into the evening. But my plan was to, about every 15 minutes, leave campsite and walk over to the creek and just pan up and down the creek. That's all I was doing, was just looking up and down the creek and then going back to the campsite about every 15, 20 minutes. And it was around midnight, and I told the guys I was walking back over to the creek again to check things out. And when I got down to the creek and I panned up and down the creek, I saw a heat signature of something standing in the water on the other side of a brushy area that all I could see was the head and shoulders, but you could clearly see that he was in the center of this creek. The creek is really wide. It's probably 30 feet wide and about a foot, average about a foot to 2 to 3 foot deep in just different areas. So whatever this was standing just in the middle of the creek, and he was staring into the other occupied camp. The only other camp that was occupied that night was a man and a woman, and they were already asleep. It was staring into their campsite while standing in the middle of the creek.
So you got to observe him. He didn't even know you were there.
No, he didn't. His attention was at the woman and man's tent.
That's crazy.
And I told the guys, I said, come here. I said, come here. I said, I think we got something. And they came over and looked at that, and they're like, yeah. And I was like, when something like this happens, you've been waiting for this for so long, and then all of a sudden, you've got some decisions to make. I wanted to get a better picture of it, but I couldn't because he was behind some brush and scrub, and I just, all I could see was his round head above this scrub standing in the creek, and I wanted him to move so I could get a better, I wanted a full body shot. So not really ever experimenting with the thermal, I tried to move to another campsite, a campsite closer, which would allow me to get down into the creek to film him. And like a fool, I tried to use the monitor for me to walk through the darkness. And you can't do that. I mean, I was tripping and stumbling, and as soon as I got around through some boulders and around a tree, I saw the heat signature of the other campsite's campfire. But I was already discombobulated with my view, and when I saw that heat signature from their dead campfire, I stopped, and I'm like, could that be what I saw? Is that what I... And it took, for a few minutes, I'm looking at their campfire thinking, no way, is that what I was looking at when I was looking over there? And I saw this little raccoon or something running by their campfire, and I was like, no way could that be what I saw. And then I realized how far that view was away from the creek, and then I continued on and found my way to a trail that took me down to the creek. By that point, when I got down to the creek, it was completely gone. I'd made too much noise. I'd lollygagged at my view of that campsite and couldn't quite figure out to get myself squared away with what I was looking at. So that was kind of a bad deal on how that panned out. But if I could have got down into the creek immediately, I think I would have caught it, trying to get away, or at least full-bodied.
Yeah.
But that was my first, really, that made me see the value of FLIR, because it just pierces the darkness, and these things don't know you're looking at them.
Thanks for watching. That was a long time ago. A lot of things have changed since then. Captured a lot of things on thermal since then. But please subscribe and share with your friends.